Now, I want to go to the issue of China and Australia, which of course has created all sorts of challenges for the government and controversy in recent times. I want to go to Liberal Senator from Tasmania, Eric Abetz. Thanks for joining us, Eric. You've been very outspoken just in the last... I'll come to China in a second. First up, can I just get your thoughts on this infrastructure spending being brought forward by the Prime Minister today? He's effectively catching up now with what the Reserve Bank and the Labor Party and others have been calling for him to do over the past 3 or 4 months.
We have a policy of $100 billion of infrastructure funding over the next 10 years, so it was a well thought out plan. It was purposeful, projects in mind, and given the current circumstances, the Prime Minister and Treasurer believe that it is appropriate to roll it out a bit quicker than may have been anticipated. But that is what a good government does. It has a plan, but is agile enough to adjust it according to the circumstances as they arise.
Scott Morrison says this should not be seen as a panic move, but when you start dragging forward $4 billion worth of spending, it starts to look like you're panicking, doesn't it?
No, because it's not sort of the cash splash that Labor had during the GFC, just throwing money around like a drunken sailor, paying the estates of dead people, etc. This is about a future plan for Australia, providing the infrastructure that is sorely needed and bringing some of that forward to provide that much needed infrastructure, but also to help stimulate the economy. All makes good sense to me, and I think the people of Australia will see it as being part of the ongoing plan, but without prejudicing the desperate need to balance our budget and start paying off the debt.
Yeah, it's economic infrastructure, so therefore you can't really criticise the investment, and Labor can say a little bit of "I told you so," but they can't really criticise what's going on here. Just about everybody would agree with the good sense involved. What's Tasmania going to get? What's the big Tasmanian project that's going to be brought forward?
Well, there are a few projects that, as I understand it, have not been announced as yet, but I am aware of some of them.
Yeah, and you're not going to share them with us? No bridge to the mainland?
Well, I can rule that one out, but other than that, there are a few projects that require a bit of extra funding to get them going, and I understand that that will be happening and announced very shortly.
OK, back to China now. Andrew Hastie and James Patterson, your colleagues, had their visas rejected because they've been critical of China. This, of course, just inflames what's a very, very sensitive time in the Australia-China relationship. That hasn't held you back though. You're out there criticising China over forced organ harvesting.
Forced organ harvesting has been an issue that I've been pursuing for some time at Senate estimates. It is a matter of genuine concern, and we're getting reports that not only are Falun Gong followers the victims, but home Christians, home church Christians are, the Uyghurs are, and indeed criminals as well, Buddhists. And this is just barbaric writ large. It offends nearly every concept of human rights.
Just explain it to us, though. Just tell us what happens. You're talking about persecuted minorities being forcibly operated on to harvest, what, kidneys? I mean, is anyone killed in these practices? And what's the level of evidence for these practices?
That is the allegation, that people are in fact killed as part of this forced organ harvesting, and the reports have been coming in slowly but surely. The most recent one is the China Tribunal, headed up by Sir Geoffrey Nice QC in the United Kingdom, whose evidence, I think, or whose gathering of evidence is pretty strong. There have been other committees looking into this as well. The European Parliament, the US Congress has passed resolutions indicating that they accept that the evidence that is rolling in is there, it's strong, it's clear, and we in Australia, one, should be condemning it, but two, also need to tread exceptionally carefully as we deal with young Chinese people coming over to be medically trained for organ transplanting, that we don't unwittingly become involved in facilitating this barbaric practice that goes on in China?
Look, it's a shocking issue, and you're right, Australia should be mindful of it, but it's been going on for a long while. Is there any need for you to raise it now? Did you not think maybe you'd just back off for a little while rather than inflame tensions at a particularly volatile time?
Well, Chris, I didn't issue a media release about this issue. In fact, I was asked by journalists who had noticed that over the few years I have been asking questions about organ harvesting, expressing my concern at Senate estimates publicly, and when given the opportunity to speak on an issue such as this, yes, of course, I was willing to be a voice, because it's got to be not only condemned, but I think the people in China, if news stories like this do filter through, that Sir Geoffrey Nice QC has in fact exposed these matters, that the European Parliament, the US Congress and a lowly senator from Hobart like myself are all seeking to champion their cause, I would like to think it would give them some strength, some comfort that they are being watched and that they have not been forgotten by the rest of the world.
Do you think that all Australian politicians, perhaps save for ministers, ought to put a bit of a boycott on travel to China until Andrew Hastie and James Patterson are given a visa?
Look, I think China overreacted, and calling on them to repent is the sort of language, sadly, that comes from dictatorships, and I think everybody will see that for what it is. My view is that ongoing dialogue would be a good thing, letting people in China know where we stand, that our trade relationship is of mutual benefit, but when it comes to human rights, we are a democracy that believes in the basic God-given fundamental human rights, whereas the communist dictatorship in China doesn't, and we simply ask people to do the compare and contrast and ask, where would you rather live? Under what regime would you rather live? Where are people better off in relation to personal freedoms and other matters? And all of the evidence indicates that our freedoms, our democracy is the best way to go in comparison, and hopefully people in China, in the elite groups, especially within the Communist Party, will start taking a different approach. Let's keep in mind that China did start going down this small L liberal approach, not only to their economy but to personal lives as well, and it's only been in more recent times that President Xi Jinping has become somewhat more authoritarian.
Yeah, there's been a hardening for sure.
Back the clock.
Yeah, that's all right. Thanks so much for joining us, Eric.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Chris.